Curiosity can make or break us, but understanding its power helps us to choose wisely. I'd like to tell you a story about a young boy who let curiosity teach him one of life's lessons the very hard way. This young boy was born in the city of Kaduna in the mid-80s to a very loving family. He had everything going on for him, and his parents wanted the best for him out of life. And so they felt they needed to send him to a Christian primary school, a Christian secondary school, and a Christian university. This young boy I talk about did everything right, everything that was asked of him, did very well in school. As a matter of fact, he had one of the best JAMB results in the entire country when he took JAMB. He went to a Christian or a mission university, and it was in this university that he had his first exposure to hard drugs. Now, what an irony. His parents took him to this university with the hope that he was going to be shielded from social vices, including drug abuse. Yet, there he was, in this citadel of excellence, being exposed to drug use. On a particular evening, some of his friends asked him to walk with them to an incomplete building. It's the current university library, which is a 4-story building. He wondered, why would anybody want to go to an unfinished building? However, his curiosity got the better part of him, and he went with them. On getting to the top floor of this building, he saw something very shocking. Some of his schoolmates were smoking, some were drinking, some were using hard drugs, and he saw the immediate effect it had on some of them. This indeed was his first exposure to substances. So there this young boy was, who has grown up in a Christian home, who has never heard anything about drug use, and was being offered drugs to use. On that evening, he said no. He didn't let his curiosity to get the better part of him, and he went back to his hostel and began thinking about what he had just experienced. He felt really bad because he knew that it was wrong, but he couldn't help those who were involved in it. A few years later, after his NYSC, he went to the UK for his master's, and then it felt like he was in the same situation again. He had friends who were saying, oh, why don't you try using this drug? Why don't you try smoking this? Why don't you try drinking that? It's going to make you feel better. It's going to make you confident. It's going to make you assimilate more. And then the pressure began to build on him, and to build on him, and to build on him. And then on a particular day, a friend offered him drugs. He began to think to himself, what if, just maybe, it's going to make me feel a little bit better? And then he accepted to take the drugs from his friend, and that was the beginning of 7 years of drug abuse and addiction in this young man's life. So there he was, a young boy who was growing up in a good home, good Christian home, had everything going on for him, was now struggling with drug use because he let his curiosity get the better part of him. Came back to Nigeria from the UK for a family function, and yet again, another friend introduced him to another type of drug, which was more addictive, more elusive, very expensive, and very quickly he became dependent on that drug. He could do nothing by himself if he wasn't able to take the drugs. Everything he needed to do, every way he needed to function was impossible except he started using drugs. Very quickly, he started spending all of the money he had. At the time, in millions of naira, he spent everything on buying drugs because he had become an addict. His parents had rented a beautiful apartment for him and bought him a beautiful car. But then he had sold everything in that apartment. He had exchanged them for drugs. because he was struggling with the addiction. This addiction was born out of the curiosity and trial and error. So here he was. He had sold everything in his apartment. Sold the refrigerators, sold the sofas, sold the electronics. Everything was gone. And then he also sold his car, because every time the urge came for him to use drugs, he didn't have money. He had to trade in something for it. So he kept on doing that over and over and over again until he had nothing. And then he spoke to the landlord and said, look, I'm not going to stay in your house anymore. I want my rent back. And the landlord gave him his rent. And then he took it back to where drugs are sold, popularly called a trap house. And there he was, spending all of this money that he had taken back from the landlord. So it got to a point where he had absolutely nothing left. So every morning when he woke up, he would go to the streets of Abuja and start begging for alms. So from place to place, he will keep begging. I'm sure some of you have seen certain places in the city of Enugu where people come with very heart-touching stories about how somebody in their family has died, about how they have one health issue or the other. So this was exactly what this young boy was doing. Sit down to think about it for a minute. This young boy grew up in a Christian home, had a loving family, went to some of the best schools in Nigeria and overseas. Now here he was, begging every day, not for money to eat, not for money to take care of himself, but for money to spend on drugs. He was living in the trap house outside the comfort of his home, in this very dirty, filthy, smelling place, not habitable for any of the beautiful faces in this auditorium. He hardly had time to have a shower. He hardly had time to brush his teeth. He hardly had time to have a change of clothes because he was addicted to drugs. It got so bad that he started getting into trouble with the law. On several occasions, the police, NDLEA would arrest him. And then at some point, when his family got to know about what he was going through, they took him in for rehabilitation. And there he was, receiving treatment for drug use. Yet the urge, the cravings, the desire to still use drugs was still within him. And even when he got out of rehabilitation, he came out and was still using drugs. He wasn't able to stop because he was addicted, simply because he acted on his curiosity to try using drugs. At some point, he had an accident, a drug-induced accident that nearly cost him his life. His leg would have been amputated, but for the mercies of God and the intelligence of the health workers, so he had metals put in his legs to hold the lower part of the rest of his leg. Yet, in that pain, in that misery, he was still addicted to drugs. With his crutches, he would go back to where drugs are sold, spend whatever money he had, and on a particular evening, exchange his crutches for drugs. This was terribly painful to watch by his parents and those who had seen him grow up, those who had had so much aspirations for him. Watching him languish in the pit of drug abuse and addiction was very hurtful. This lasted 7 years. In the period of that 7 years, this young boy lost 4 of his friends, including a classmate who went to school with him in university that died of a drug overdose. This thing is real. It's a true life story I'm telling you about. Simply because he acted on his curiosity. After 7 years of this addiction, one day he felt he had to put an end to this. And then he had become depressed, he had become suicidal, and he decided to take poison to end it all. And he did take poison to end it all. But then, luckily for him, when the poison began to take effect, his younger brother came into the house, saw him foaming from his mouth, and he was being rushed to the hospital. and there he was resuscitated. And that became the turning point in his life. And that was where 7 years of drug abuse and addiction came to an end. The reason I'm telling you this story is because I want you to know that our minds are curious, and it's important that we harness the positive parts of our curiosity. The young boy I was telling you about in that story is the young man speaking to you today. I struggled with drug abuse and addiction for 7 years because probably I was curious and I wanted to experiment with what I thought was going to come out of that curiosity. And it led me to 7 years of addiction of my life. Nobody has to go through that in this auditorium. Luckily, I'm here to share with you a few tips on how you can avoid the same mistakes that I made. Number one, we must be self-disciplined. It's very important. To all the young people in this auditorium this morning, I want to encourage you to be self-disciplined. As difficult as it may seem, you can't make it far in life without self-discipline. Number two, we should understand our purpose in life and live every day like we are living for that purpose. A wise man once said, a man who does not understand his purpose will distract himself with pleasure or what seems like pleasure. So please, it's important that everyone here knows why he or she is on earth today. If you do not know, be intentional about discovering why you're on earth today and guard that very jealously. Number three, we should learn to manage our emotions. It's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to feel anxious at times. However, we should learn to manage our emotions so that we do not act wrongly as a result of how we feel. Yes, that's very important. And then finally, we should remember the place of prayer. Very important. Every morning, you should say a prayer for God to keep you away from temptation. You should say a prayer for God to keep you away from evil, because these things do exist. For our parents here, and our teachers, and our caregivers, it's important that we set the right examples for our young ones to follow. Because they are watching us. They are watching us. They are watching what we do. They want to follow our footsteps, not necessarily what we say, but what we do and how we do it. In closing, I want to remind everyone here that curiosity is a gift. Please make sure that you do not let your curiosity lead you into a trap, just like mine did and kept me stuck for 7 years. However, make sure that your curiosity will unleash you into the future that you desire. Thank you very much.